Good morning, everyone. It's time now to continue our study today on marriage, and this is number 5 in the marriage theme. And this is going to be a 10-minute basically presentation, and we're going to open our Bibles at 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 1. And here Paul talks a lot about marriage. He has a lot to say on it, and very practical and very comprehensive. Probably the most comprehensive place that Paul has talked about in the New Testament. So this is complementary to the other studies that we've had, but we're going to concentrate on this one area today. And this is a very important area because the second most important decision that you will make is your marriage partner in life. And this is after a relationship with Jesus Christ as your first marriage partner. So the difference between marriage to Christ and marriage to a person is that Christ is perfect, the perfect marriage partner, and he understands the human well. He understands everything about us, and he knows the best way to win us into the kingdom. But when it comes to a marriage partner, then we have two human beings, but they should be both connected to God. But as we look at, as we go along, there's marriages where people have been unbelievers, both of them, and then they become believers, and so that's good if they both do, but sometimes one person becomes a believer and the other one doesn't. And then what happens? So we want to work through these principles here and see what the Lord has for us. So let's read from verse 1 now. Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. So certainly they were living in troublous times back there in the Roman Empire, and Christians were often the subject of terrible persecution because the Christians believed in putting God first above the Roman Empire, above the state. And therefore, in many cases, it was better for people not to get involved in marriage if they could successfully carry out that purpose for their life. But we know that people like the Corinthians and the Ephesians and the Philippians and these Roman-based people in the Roman Empire, that they could not contain themselves very well. And therefore Paul makes some special advice for everyone, because he was the man who God chose to take the gospel to the Gentiles in particular. So they asked him the question about marriage, and because of the situation that they were in, they asked him probably whether it was good to get married or something along those lines. They knew Paul wasn't married, or doesn't appear to be married at this time. He may have been married at an earlier time. We don't seem to know that history as far as I know. But in Paul's case, it was better for him not to marry because he was a person who was in great danger a lot of the time. And so therefore, because he was in that danger, it was not good for him to have a family. It was not good for a woman to have to follow him around through the thick and the thin of the persecutions, the fears and the perplexities of that kind of life. And John the Baptist and Jesus and others chose not to be married for similar reasons. But then there is this other consideration that people who came from the background, the sensual background, the background where there was a lot of sexual relationships and all kinds of sexual relationships which were occurring in the culture of the Roman Empire at that time. It was better to marry in a lot of cases than be subject to all the troubles that might come to you if you were weak in that area. And so Paul is very plain. He says, nevertheless, to avoid fornication. So fornication is having a sexual relationship with someone who's not your wife or husband, or or perhaps a sexual relationship between two people who are not married. So Paul counsels to avoid fornication for practicing Christians. Let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. And this is good counsel because a lot of chaos comes from men or women having several partners, many partners in their life, and often many children, especially back then when there was no contraception so much. Many children to different partners either way. So that causes a lot of problems because God designed us to have the one partner for life, basically, and then if that person died, to have another partner if we wished. So let's go on now. It's better for most people, I would say today, almost all people. There's only a few exceptions where people can legitimately live in a single relationship with God as Christians and not have these kind of problems with sexuality. And so because of the weakness of the human race today, which is corresponding to the weakness of the Corinthians and the weakness of the Ephesians and so on in the Roman Empire, it is better that every man have his own wife and every woman have her own husband. Verse 3, let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence. Let the husband render due benevolence. Now here Paul is getting very practical about rendering due benevolence. And let's read on through the verse. And likewise also the wife unto the husband. So there is two-way due benevolence. Now what is true benevolence? Well, true benevolence equals kindness, care, love, consideration, gentleness, and so forth. And in the next study we will continue from this point of how we are to manifest in our marriage due benevolence, and Paul makes it very practical here. The Bible is a practical book as well as a spiritual book. It's a practical book in mental, in the mind, things too, and it's practical in every way. So we'll go to the next study now to take this point further. Thank you.